Story 1. The Giggle Chamber. They say every tragedy begins with someone laughing. That's how I open my statement. The detective gives a look that lives somewhere between pity and paperwork. The room smells of burnt coffee, old carpet, and that faint metallic aftertaste you get when blood tries to pass as disinfectant. Amber light hums through the blinds, dust hangs in the air like applause that forgot to stop. Relax, he says. You're not the one on trial. I give him a short customer service chuckle. You'd be surprised how often I hear that. He presses record. The red light blinks, a tiny accusation. Before the clubs and the crowds, there was a house where we never cried. Mum said, tears made, ghosts jealous. So we laughed at funerals, at breakups, at bills we couldn't pay. I was 5 when my father slipped on black ice. Mum stood over him and laughed so hard her voice cracked like TH. He pavement under his head, that sound, stitch something in. Emmy, a thread that never stopped vibrating. I learned early that laughter is cheaper than grief. It started, I tell him, with a chuckle. The club was called the Giggle Chamber. Bad omen, but a decent bar. Neon sputtered outside, casting red and blue across faces that wanted to forget their day jobs. Inside, the walls were painted black, but you could still see the water stains underneath, like old bruises showing through makeup. The mic smelt of nerves and metcum ... That first night, someone cracked a joke about penguins or politicians, the usual sort. The crowd laughed in unison. People-pleaser kind of laughter that says, we're fine. Honestly, watched from the bar, nursing a warm beer. When the comedian left the stage, the applause died. But the laughter didn't. It stayed in the room like smoke after a fire. Soft at first, barely there, the bartender wiped down glass and hummed along to it. Thought it was the speakers. The manager checked the sound system twice. But I heard it clearly, underneath everything. A chuckle that didn't belong to anyone. I walked to the stage, empty now, just the microphone stand and a stool with a wobbly leg. The laughter seemed to come from the floorboards or maybe the walls. I touched the mic. It was warm behind. The bar hung a yellowing poster from an old comedy tour in small print. Fear and farce share a punchline. I used to think it was clever marketing. Now I think it was a warning. The detective tilts his pen. You're saying laughter spread. I'm saying it evolved. A week later, I was back on stage. Different crowd. Same hunger for distraction. I told a story about my mother, about black ice and cracked voices. They laughed nervously at first, and sure if it was allowed. Then harder. And then, too hard, a woman in the third row couldn't stop. Her friends patted her back, handed her water. She doubled over, gasping between convulsions. The laughter twisted into something else, something wet. She slid off her chair. Security carried her out, still giggling, tears streaming down her face. The rest of the audience watched, frozen. Then someone in the back started laughing, then another. Within seconds, the whole room was howling. Not at my joke, but at her ... I stood on stage and felt it, that hum beneath the sound, the nervous laugh. It smelt of static and perfume testers, panic dressed in polite clothes, a man keel over mid-chuckle at the 6 o'clock news 2 days later. His chest still jolted when the paramedics zipped the bag. I smiled along when I saw it online. You have to. Silence gets you noticed. Didn't that strike you as odd? The detective asks. Everything's normal if it's popular. Then came the contagious laugh. It traveled quicker than rumor. People caught it on buses and lifts during moments of silence, so seemingly a stranger's grin could expand your lungs. The media, unusually in agreement, called it the Joe Plague. Couples who hadn't spoken in months started wheezing together. Some posted pics in panic, hashtag for better for worse, then waited for likes that never came. While the chuckles kept going, teachers collapsed mid-lesson. Students smirked in the surprising silence. A funeral went viral when the priest slipped on wet grass. The mourners clapped for 5 straight minutes. The mayor live-streamed herself laughing for SX when she finally gasped, "Please stop recording." No one did. The detective folds his arms. "And you, did you catch it? I was born wit. H it," he frowns. "What kind?" "The quiet one. The sort that looks like control. The one grief wears to work." He hesitates. The tape hums. "I call it the silent laugh. It sounds like relief, feels like drowning. It's what happens when a scream learns manners." I lean back in my chair. For the first time since we started, my hands are shaking. I press them flat against the table, but they won't stop. There's a moment right after the laughter dies when your body forgets who it belongs to. Your lungs still remember the rhythm. Your heart doesn't. That's where I live. In that pause, the detective watches my hands. I pull them back into my lap. ... He says nothing. Good. Silence is the only honest audience. He slides photographs across the table, mouths open mid-laugh. "That's all wrong. Recognize anyone?" I point. "That's the chuckle blue jacket. That's the nervous one. See her hands? And then that's the contagious one. Center frame. We ran facial recognition," he says. "There's only one person in every photo." I smile. "But it takes effort this time." "You don't say. You were on stage." "I was. So were they." He closes the folder. 48 dead, 48 set free. That's not funny. Neither was their laughter. A twitch flickers at his mouth. A single chuckle escapes. The mirror breathes back the sound, stretching it. He touches his throat. "A touch too late. You shouldn't laugh in small rooms," I whisper. "They say the tape corrupted the laughed, distorted into something liquid, and underneath was a whispered, 'Help me.' The report calls it mass psychogenic illness. TikTok calls me the laughing man. Block I call it feedback. The viral kind they moved me to isolation, where guards wear headphones that play rain. Doctors hum children's songs as they walk the corridor, and yet still their shoulders shake. They always pretend it's AC. OUGH ... You want truth. They were all mine. Every single one." The chuckle opened the door. The nervous filled the cracks. The contagious made sure everyone heard. The silent waited underneath them all. T wasn't Joe, it was need, a plea for someone to listen to grief without remixing it as comedy. Behind my eyes, scenes replay in wandering visions. Moonlit confession rooms, shifting walls, shows that never end, but change sets each episode. You'd like them, detective. They're darkly funny. They send a new interrogator, young, fresh, the sort who still believes empathy is sterile. He brings tea he won't drink. Do you feel remorse? Of course. Every time someone laughs, I hear it. He stops the recorder. Then what do you, Washington? Empty. I lean close enough for my breath to fog the glass, to hear silence again. He half laughs, a reflex, a habit. then catches himself and leaves. The light flickers amber, then white, while Dostoev floats like ghosts taking their unwelcome bows. I open my mouth, but no sound comes. Some laughs are better left unheard. The footage ends there. Story 2. The 13th door. I touched the frostbit in cheek of the corpse in the alley, ignoring the rain sliding down my neck. She shouldn't be this warm. The sleet had turned the ground into a gray mirror, and the security light above the restaurant's back door flickered with the desperate rhythm of a dying heart. The air reeked of fish sauce and copper, rotting vegetables and blood. My breath fogged in front of me, visible proof that I was saint, ill among the living. Hers didn't, yet her skin held warmth that had no business being there. Hours after death and weather cold enough to freeze tears before they hit the ground, I pressed my palm flat against her cheek. She was young, late 20s, with dark hair plastered to her forehead by the freezing rain. Pretty in the way corpses sometimes are before decay settles in and steals everything human from their faces. Her eyes were open, staring up at nothing, and someone had positioned her arms at her sides with care. Too neat for a random death, too deliberate to whisper start. At the moment my skin met hers, it wasn't words, not at first. The sound bypassed my ears entirely and went straight into the marrow of my bones, into the old scar across my throat that ached. And never death came calling. The language was older than speech, older than writing, older than the human need to communicate. I recognized it the way you recognize your mother's voice calling you home. My mother used to murmur in this tongue when she thought I was sleeping. Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. Sarah's voice cut through the whispers, a lifeline thrown into dark water. I pulled my hand away from the dead woman's face, but the sound continued at the edge of my hearing, patient and hungry. Depends on what you think I'm doing. I stood, my knees racking in protest. The cold had gotten into my joints, settled there with proprietary familiarity. Something that'll give me paperwork nightmares for a month. Sarah Chen stood at the mouth of the alley, her hand resting on the butt of her service weapon. Force of habit. The dead weren't her jurisdiction. Not really, but she kept coming back anyway. Because of you, something whispered. Not the corpse this time, my own treacherous mind. This isn't a normal murder. I moved toward her, away from the body. Though the distance did nothing to quiet the voice in my head, she's not quite dead. Sarah's eyebrows drew together. Her heart stopped 6 hours ago, Marcus. The me confirmed it. Her heart stopped. That's not the same thing. I glanced back at the womb, and in the alley at her open eyes reflecting the stuttering light. She's still dying. She's been dying for hours. And whatever killed her wants me to watch. We walked to Sarah's car, the sleet denning into snow that fell too fast, too thick for early December. The Weather Service had no explanation for the cold snap that had seized the city 3 weeks ago and refused to let go. I had explanation, yes, but none anyone wanted to hear. Third one this week, Sarah said. She pulled her coat tighter, her breath coming in short, visible bursts. Same signature. No visible causal death, no defensive wounds, found in random locations across the city, all of them running warm. The brass is starting to ask questions I can't answer. 3 bodies, 3 days, the pattern CL icked into place with the inevitability of a lock tumbling open. Who's counting? I was hoping you could tell me." She stopped beside her car, one hand on the door handle, her knuckle as white with cold or tension or both. "The weather's been wrong since this started. Animals leaving the city, dogs howling at nothing. Tell me it's coincidence." I couldn't tell her that. I wouldn't lie to her face, even when the truth was something she'd refuse to believe. Someone's performing a ritual, old magic, the kind that leaves marks on the world. I watched her expression tighten, watched her jaw set in that stubborn line I knew too well. They need 13 sacrifices to complete it. We're running out of time. 13 sacrifices, 12 to open the doors, one to hold them wide. The knowledge rose unbidden, drawn from the whispers, or from something deeper, something my mother had buried in me before she vanished. I shoved it down, but it left a residue, oily and cold. Sarah stopped walking under the street light. Her face looked carved from amber, all plains and shadows. She smelled like coffee and gun oil and something floral she'd deny wearing if I asked. The tension between us stretched taut, a wire waiting to snap. "Are you okay?" Not professionally. The question lived in her eyes, in the careful distance she maintained, in the way she held her body angle slightly away from mine. 3 years ago, I knew what her hair felt like spread across my pillow. 3 years ago, I saw how she was going to die, and I hadn't ouch her sense. She never asked why I pulled away. I never offered an explanation. Some things are kinder left unspoken. "I'm fine. You're a terrible liar." "I'm an excellent liar." "You're too good a detective." I turned back toward the alley, the snow crunching under my boots. I need to hear more. Before they move her, Sarah caught my arm. Her grip was firm through my coat sleeve, and even with the layers between us, my ability stirred, reaching toward her the way a plant reaches toward light. I held it back. I always held it back with her. "Marcus," her voice stopped me at the corner. "Be careful." "I'm always careful." "You're never careful." That's the problem. She wasn't wrong. Careful people didn't walk toward the dead. Careful people didn't let dying whisper their secrets into ears that shouldn't be able to hear. Careful people stay on the living side of the line I'd crossed the day I fell through the ice. I walked back to the alley. My way, the me still hadn't arrived. Budget cuts, backlog, the usual excuses that let the dead wait while the living sorted out their bureaucracy. I knelt beside the woman again, studying her face in the flickering light. She had laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and a small scar on her chin, the kind you get falling off a bike as a child. She had a name, a life. Someone is missing. Right now. I pulled off my gloves. My hands were pale, the veins standing out in blue-green tributaries, my nails carrying the permanent tinge of someone who'd spent too long in the cold. The ritual my mother taught me came back with muscle memory. 3 slow breaths, a mental image of root sinking into stone, the whispered words that anchored me to my own body. Then I pressed my palms to either side of her face and let myself fall. The whispers became a roar. The tunnel smells like wet stone and something sweeter, older. Incense and decay. Candles flickering in alcoves carved Fr. Living rock. A voice saying you are the 12th door, and hands that are gentle as they press me down against cold stone. The cold starts in my chest and blooms outward, ice crystals forming in my blood, my lungs seizing, my heart stuttering. I think of my mother, her laugh, the way she sang, how she cooked. Then I can't remember having a mother then I can't remember my own name, then I can't remember. I pulled back, gasping. But the death hadn't finished with me yet. Elena's final moments clung to me, desperate and demanding, refusing to release their grip, her terror mixed with determination, her rage at dying before she could finish what she'd started. Through the chaos of her dying, another voice emerged, hers, Elena Vasquez, graduate, student, researcher of dead things and dying gods. The Thorn Chapel, beneath 13 doors, 12 opened. One night left, the name, the connection shattered. I fell backward, my hands numb, my lips bloodless. White edged my vision, and for a moment I couldn't remember my own name. I'd given too much of myself to the contact. The boundary between the living and dead worn, thin as tissue paper. What I'd gotten, what I needed. The face from Elena's memory surfaced in my mind, Albrecht Thorn. Old money, older blood on the boards of half the city's charities. I'd met him once at my mother's funeral, a funeral with no body, because she'd never been found. He'd touched my hand in the receiving line and said, "Your mother understood sacrifice." I thought T was something people said at funerals. The snow fell harder, hand in the distance. Something howled, not an animal, not the wind. Something that had been hungry for a very long time, the Thorn fam. Illy Chapel crouched at the edge of their ancestral cemetery, all Gothic stone and stained glass that told the wrong stories. The windows showed figures that were almost human, almost holy, their eyes too numerous, their smiles too wide. The founding families, frozen in glass, watching over the graves of their descendants with expressions that promised nothing good. The iron gate skir, aimed when I pushed through it. The cemetery stretched before me, headstones jutting from the snow in crooked rows, and the silence was absolute. No wind, no night birds, no distant traffic. E-world held its breath. The chapel door was unlocked. They were expecting me. Of course they are. They've been waiting 20 years. Inside, the air was colder than outside, which shouldn't have been possible. The pews were covered in a thin layer of frost, and the altar gleamed with ice crystals that caught the moonlight filtering through those terrible windows. My footsteps echoed like heartbeats in the empty space behind the altar. I found the trapdoor. The cold rising from below was absolute, the kind of cold that existed in the spaces between stars, in the pause between any heartbeat and the absence of the next. My scar throbbed, the old language humming through the damaged tissue. Every instinct said run. Every instinct had said run for 27 years. Ever since I came back from a frozen lake, changed into something that wasn't quite a boy anymore. I went down anyway. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber carved from stone so old it predated the city above. 12 figures stood in alcoves around the walls, and every one of them was a corpse that refused to stop dying. They whispered in unison the same words Elena had spoken, language of Colthraxis. I walked among them, a homeless man with frost in his beard, a jogger still in her running shoes, a teenager clutching a phone that would never ring again. Elena's place stood empty, the 12th door waiting for her body. The whispers pressed against my skin, tangible as fingers, and the frost on the walls moved in patterns that made my eyes water and my stomach clench. The cold tasted of metal and salt, blood and ash. Marcus Vane, Aldic Thorne emerged from the darkness. He wore ritual robes, but they looked tailored, expensive, even in Madden. As he had taste, his smile was gentle, almost kind. Your mother said you'd come eventually. My mother's dead. No. He spread his hands, encompassing the chamber, the corpses, the hungry dark pressing in from every side. Cheese the 13th. Door, she's been waiting for you. The words hit me in the chest, a physical blow. I staggered, and Thorne's smile widened. She gave herself to the ritual willingly, you see, became the final vessel, but she wasn't quite ready. Her love for you kept a piece of her tethered to this world. He stepped closer, and the cold deepened harrow, and him bending toward him the way flowers bend toward the sun. We need you to sever that connection. Let go of her, release her memory, and when Colthraxis wakes, you'll feel nothing, not cold, not grief, not the weight of every death you've ever touched, nothing forever. The offer wrapped around me, seductive as a lover's whisper. An end to the pain, an end to seeing death in every face, feeling it in every touch, an end to being the thing that came back wrong from a frozen lake and never quite found its way home. For a moment, my mother's voice joined the chorus. It's okay to stop fighting, baby. It's okay to rest. For a moment, I wanted it. But Elena's voice was there too. Her last message, incomplete. The name, the binding, doesn't work by king names. It works by giving them. The God can only consume. What is surrendered willingly, understanding flooded through me, cold and clarifying. My mother hadn't given her name. She'd given her love for me, the one thing she couldn't let go of. Even at the end, the one thing that kept her bound to this world, waiting. And that meant I still had it. And that meant it could be talk. And back, you want nothing. I stepped forward, reaching out not with my body, but with my ability, touching all 12 corpses at once, taking their deaths into myself. The pain was extraordinary, a symphony of endings playing through my nervous system, a heart attack, a drowning, a slow fade from hypothermia. I felt them all, carried them all, refused to let them become nothing. I'll give you nothing. I spoke my mother's name, her full name, the one she used in her practice, the one with power. Catherine Elizabeth Vane. I spoke my own, Marcus Daniel Vane. I claimed them both, each syllable a declaration of war against the hungry dark. I give you everything these people wanted to live for, every hope, every love, every moment they were denied. The God recalled. Colthraxis had expected surrender. It didn't want this, couldn't consume this. Grief and rage and the desperate human need to survive weren't nourishment. They were poison. I fed it the opposite oblivion. The desperate desire to be. The chamber shook, the frost shattered, falling from the walls and sheets. The whispers turned to screams, not of victory, but of starvation. The 12 corpses collapsed. Finally, truly dead. The walls cracked, and somewhere above, stone groaned and gave way. Thorne tried to run. The tunnel collapsed on him. I didn't watch my Mo. Her appeared before me, the thing she'd become. For a moment, she looked like herself. Brown hair streaked with gray, tired eyes that had seen too much. She was smiling. You always were too stubborn. I learned from you, I know. The light behind her grew brighter, warmer. I'm sorry, I know. She dissolved into light, and the cold inside my chest, the sea, old that had lived there since I was 7 years old, finally broke. Dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold as I climbed from the ruins of the chapel. The snow had stopped. The air was still cold, but it was a normal cold, a winter cold, a cold that wouldn't kill you if you dressed warm enough and kept moving. Sarah was waiting by her car, having followed when I didn't answer my phone. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she didn't ask questions. She draped her coat around my shoulders and guided me toward the passenger door. I looked at her profile in the early light. I still saw her death, everyone's death. A car accident, 23 years from now, quick and painless. I'd carry that knowledge forever. But for the first time in 3 years I took her hand anyway. I'm cold, I said, I know. I'm always cold, I know that too. She didn't let go, neither did I. The sun rose over a city that would never know how close it had come to an eternal winter, and somewhere beneath the snow, 12 people finally rested. My mother's voice was silent in my head, but the warmth she'd left behind remained, a small flame against the dark. It was enough. It would have to be enough. Story 3. Sister Dorothea's Fist. November 1st, 2025. Lisbon. Rodrigo Pereira was coughing. Why was his throat so tight? He sat in a corner of the bookstore cafe speaking to his girlfriend. Are you okay? She asked. Your face looks puffy and red. Of course I'm okay. Did you hear me? You think we should see other people. I have come to that realization. Yes. He gulped air. It didn't help. Why? Have you found somebody else? I may have. My life is my own. The room felt stuffy, the air stale. Does this have to do with your project? You say it with such disdain. Yes, I want to open a museum across the street, at the site of Dom Alfonso de Almeida per Ira's home, my ancestor. He couldn't give the proud words their proper gravitas. His throat felt too much friction to go beyond a reedy whisper. Are you sure you're okay? I'm fine enough, he rasped, and smiled the way he did when he said he liked her cooking. His girlfriend held up the book she had been flipping through. I wouldn't be too sure about glorifying this guy. Do you know what the nobility were up to back in the 1700s? They were pretty corrupt. He sucked in a deep breath. There is nothing bad written about Dom Alfonso. He paused to who? What happened to the heir? He was a beloved patron of the convent that used to be half-kilometer down the road. He was practically a saint. She ignored him. According to this, some 18th century patrons of convents received more than moral edification. What are you talking about? He rasped. She read, with melodrama, the monks and nuns live in the Saint scandalous libertinism. The nuns' parlors are always full. They have an air of indecency and a backstage tone like that of the actresses in France. His vision felt constricted. He blinked a few times. She pointed to a painted image of a richly dressed woman who looked like a cross between the Virgin and 18th century Portuguese royalty. The most famous nun was Paula of Ovidela. She caught the eye of King Joel V, and then soon after she was pregnant. Then she was promoted to Mother Superior. Rodrigo wasn't listening. He got up. His lungs felt fire. Each breath sparked points of light in his vision. He got up and paced with one hand in front of his mouth, the other running through his wavy black hair. Then he collapsed. After the crowd, the police, and the question, was it a fatal disease? No. He didn't have a virus. He didn't have the plague, cardiac arrest. No, his heart was in good condition. Poison. That was closer to what the FINA-L medical diagnosis was. Apparently, there was mold in the foundation of the building, which before the great earthquake formed the estate of Duke Lucas de Carvalho. Specific individuals could be susceptible to the mold and in some cases suffer anaphylactic shock and die. Later, the bookstore owners broke the floor to clear out the mold and found two skeletons. A man with the back of H, his skull crushed. A woman. November 1st, 1755, Lisbon, just after midnight on the morning of the Feast of All Saints. Mother Superior Abbess Beatriz knocked on the door of Afonso de Almeida Pereira, a landowner and patron of her convent. She was shown into his sitting room, a book-lined sanctuary with a lush animal skin rug and a crackling hearth. 2 comfortable chairs were half-fachy. Ng the fire. Dom Afonso was sitting in one of them, sipping port wine. He rose when she entered and bowed. She said, "Dom Afonso, it pleases me to find you still awake. I suppose I am lucky that you dined so late." He smiled warmly, his lustrous black hair and beard dancing in the firelight. "Mother Beatriz, you are always welcome here. Yes, I conduct research that often takes me past normal waking hours. Come, sit. How can I help you?" He poured her a glass of port. She was loath to begin. "I come to you with a most disturbing matter." He looked in her eyes and took a slow, deep breath. She felt herself doing the same. "Please, you are safe here," he said. "Unburden yourself." She suppressed a shiver. "My heart stops when I imagine it." A body hanging by a rope from one of Dom Lucas's olive trees. The lands of Dom Afonso and Dom Lucas abutted the walls of the convent. A body whose poor young sister Dorotea, only days ago she had taken her novitiate vows. Afonso swallowed some port. On Dom Lucas's land, you say? What connection could she have with him? You can guess they had spoken before of Dom Lucas's appetites. Mother Beatriz was forced to tolerate him because of the lavish gifts he bestowed on the convent. But he had on more than one occasion violated the sanctity and chastity of her nuns. Dom Afonso smoothed his long, black hair. "Take me to the body." Dom Afonso enjoyed a reputation as a man who could see through appearances to the truth. Beyond, people still spoke in wonder of how he had once recovered the king's Brazilian gold when the coach carrying it mysteriously disappeared. He was also quite handsome. For these reasons he was always welcome at the convent. On news of his arrival, a small crowd of nuns gathered in the cloister. He strode across the courtyard in leather boots, black beard thrust forward, led by the Mother Superior. Sister Dorotea's body lay on a stone table in the cold kitchen. The fire had been doused hours before. The cook was folding bread for the upcoming Feast of All Saints, but Mother Beatriz dismissed her. Afonso examined the body. The novice's veil was torn off, and her dark hair had loosened, falling around her shoulders. He checked the skirts of her habit, noting that her undergarments had been removed. The skirts were splashed with clay of the sort found on the moors that border the convent and the lands of Dom Lucas and Dom Afonso. One of the girl's fists was tightly clenched. 3 strands of black hair, which Dom Afonso said were likely her own, were locked in her grip. Often when victimized, a woman will tear out her hair, he said. she was assaulted by Dom Lucas? Mother Beatrice asked. That is how it appears. The day's monastic prayers began with matins at 3 a.m., followed by lauds at dawn and 6 a.m., or prayer sessions over the course of the day. Mother Beatrice would get no sleep. She arrived at Dom Lucas's property at 9 a.m. and waited for Dom Alfonso. The olive trees along the path to the front door had not been cared for. They twisted uncomfortably away from his extensive palacio, as if shunning the horrors within. Sister Dorothea had been found hanging from a tree like one of these in the orchards to T. West, bordering Dom Alfonso's land. The crescent moon watched Beatrice's shadow shorten as the sun rose. Her patience shrunk with her shadow. She would enter the bear's den alone and let Dom Alfonso follow when he was able. Dom Lucas was at breakfast. He sat alone at one end of a long table with a platter of food in front of him. Boiled eggs, breads, meats, cheeses, and past rise of all sorts. Beatrice glimpsed swirled cinnamon rolls and lightly caramelized custard, both originating from the kitchens of her convent. A bottle of Madeira sat uncorked next to his cup. W.H. Herr Dom Alfonso was a sleek froth with aquiline nose and high cheeks. Dom Lucas was a round-faced, lumbering bear, where Dom Alfonso had thick black hair that rippled smoothly like the Tagus at midnight. Dom Lucas's light brown wisps had forsaken his freckled crown and fell in grungy strands from his temples. The room was long and cold. The fireplace behind Dom Lucas may have warmed his back, but the heat failed to reach Mother Beatrice as she entered. The fiery flicker traced his bulk with a satanic light. A walking stick was hanging by a hook on the wall next to the mantel. He recalled news of a riding accident a few days before. Mother Beatrice, welcome. Sit, he smiled blandly and tilted his head back in a partial nod, but did not get up. He instructed a servant to bring water. To what do I owe the pleasure? He asked. She moved to a seat halfway along the table, but remained standing. We found Sister Dorothea, she said, Unab, lad who contained a hint of venom. You found her? Had she been lost? She was hanging from one of your olive trees. Violated and murdered, she said acidly. This is sad news, he said while chewing, with a voice he might have used to lament the loss of a shoe. She was found on your land. Yes, I heard you say that. What would you have me do? This is a CR. Certainly I have come to accuse you. She held her breath. The skin of his face turned pink. He snorted, filled his mouth with a pastel de nata. I am incapable of such a deed. Incapable? You have on more than one occasion used my nuns only now. Faced with his gluttonous degeneracy, did she fathom how appalling that experience must have been for them? And you allowed it. You have been my lieutenant in these pursuits. He smiled smugly. Was the villain correct? His corruption was on the surface for all to see. But that did not mean her nun's habit did not also hide a stain on her own soul. For the good of the order, I have sacrificed. She raised her head, defying him to disagree. He smirked through crumbs. I thank you for your sacrifice. I have had a most delectable time. You are a monster, quite certainly. And you have fed me, he said before poking a lump of bread between his lips. But I don't believe I have had the pleasure of Sister Dorothea's company. Was she quite dutiful before she was killed? That is, he laughed and rinsed his mouth with wine. Beatrice had begun to finger the handle of a meat cleaver she had hidden in her vestments. Her face became hot, her arms trembled. "You will burn," she said. He showed teeth indeed, "as will you." Before she knew what she was doing, she had crossed the room and was standing beside him, clenching the knife tightly beneath the fabric. He pushed his chair back with his arms and turned to her. There was something not right with his legs. They hung limp, and his breeches appeared damp. "Are you coming to seek absolution? If I were a priest, you would need to get on your knees," he grinned. She dove onto him, knife in hand, but he pulled her towards him, laughing as if welcoming a lover. She felt his stubbled face smash hers and was trapped by the strength of his limbs against his pillowed pool. Her arms splayed out. His hug was too powerful to get leverage to swing the knife. Smelling wine and cheese and something rotten, she struggled to pull away. Her feet slipped on something, wet, coating the floor beneath his chair. A putrid smell assaulted her nostrils, and she gagged. Dom Lucas continued to hold her, chuckling steaming breath onto her face, a rabid dog, enjoying deranged entertainment. At that moment, the floor began to shake. She thought perhaps a parade of coaches was passing, but there was no boat close to the house. It was an unnatural feeling, as if the Lord himself were expressing anger with his sinful flock. The entire house vibrated. Windows rattled, the door to the room swung. The heavy chandelier hanging over the table danced. In frightening jerks. Dom Lucas seemed not to notice he was Satan incarnate, welcoming the end of the world. Beatrice didn't have the strength to persist against him. The horror of Dorothea's violated body, Beatrice's sleepless night, the self-disgust at her crime against her innocent charges, all weighed her soul. Perhaps this was the penance she deserved. She leaned forward, as if accepting his embrace. "Yes, receive my blessing." He laughed at his own jest. He raised his hand to her head, pulling her lips towards his cavernous mouth. This deprived the hug of its force on that side. It also exposed his flank. She bent her arm and jerked the knife into his side. He shouted in pain and released her. The shuddering earth became more vehement. A portion of the floor behind him cracked and tore open, creating a hole as large as a person. Before he could again reach for her, Beatrice backed away uncertainly on the trembling floor. She grabbed his walking stick from its hook. Dom Lucas now was aware of the world. For the first time he seemed frightened. He pushed his arms against the chair, trying to stand, but couldn't. The putrid smell, his riding accident. He reached towards Beatrice. "Give me this stick," he commanded. "You want this?" she asked. She felt a sudden dizziness, terraced in the collapsing world around her. Only the gnarled wooden shaft made any sense. "Yes." Quickly, she held the walking stick out to his supplicating hand. He reached greedily. Then she aimed it higher, running towards him. She thrust the staff into his sternum. She pressed forwards until he and his chair toppled into the newly formed chasm. Looking down into the hole, she saw Dom Lucas's face, dark liquid pooled around his stringy hair. The world shaking animated his head, but his bulging eyes held no life. He needed a stick to walk. He must have damaged his legs irreparably. "I am incapable of such a deed." Dom Lucas was not Sister Dorothea's attacker. This was Armageddon. But instead of preparing to meet her final judgment, Beatrice thought of the black hairs in Sister Dorothea's fist. Why would the girl pull out her own hair? And why had Dame Alphonse never arrived? A portion of the ceiling fell on top of Beatrice, and she lost consciousness. Some time later she was awakened by a rush of water. She thought of Dame Alphonse's black wavy hair, like the Tagus at midnight. The Tagus, whose overflowing banks now flooded her lungs and Brugge. HT realization of Sister Dorothea's actual tormentor. With her last awareness, she cursed him and his descendants. Story 4. The gift of icy terror. The sea was a beast that night, vast and merciless. Waves rose like mountains, crashing against the longship Stormfang with a fury that threatened to grind it into splinters. The men bent to their oars, muscles straining, faces ghost pale in the lightning's glare. Thor's beard. The sea itself wants us dead, Herrick bellowed, voice swallowed by the storm. His knuckles whitened, eyes wide with terror. Row. Jorund roared from the prow, hair whipping like a banner of defiance. The gods test us. Better to drown than crawl. Thunder split the sky, rain lashed their faces, and the ship lurched sideways. Leaf, the youngest, nearly pitched into the black maw of the sea. He clung to the rail, teeth chattering. Chieftain, he cried, we'll be dashed against the rocks, Jorund's eyes blazed. Then let the rocks remember our names. Hours bled away in chaos, until, at last, the storm relented. Dawn crept across the horizon, pale and cold. But the sight that greeted them was no homecoming. They had been cast into a fjord none recognized. Jagged peaks and endless ice. A glacier loomed ahead, its face shimmering with pale fire. The air was colder than death, silence heavy as a shroud. Leaf whispered, do you see it? The ice, it glows indeed. Faint light flickered beneath the frozen wall, as though something alive pulsed within. The crew of the Stormfang made landfall, dragging the boat onto shore to avoid its damage. Against the jagged rocks, Jorund stepped forward, boots crunching frost. Cursed or blessed, we'll see the gods hide treasures where cowards fear to tread. The men exchange uneasy glances. The fjord felt wrong, too still, too watchful. Yet Jorund's voice carried command, and none dared defy him. Axes bit into ice, sparks flying. Time passed not as swiftly, sweat freezing on brows, until the glacier cracked. Some kind of artifact slid free. A disk, bold and yet pale, runes writhing like living things. Leaf trembled. It speaks. I hear words in the wind. Jorund seized it, holding it high. Then listen well, the gods speak only to the worthy. The air grew colder, silence deepened. Somewhere within the glacier, a rumble stirred. Herrick spat. We've broken something that should have stayed untouched. Jorund grinned. No, we have broken fate itself. The artifact pulsed brighter, answering his claim, and the ice groaned like a waking beast. Night fell heavy. The men huddled around a feeble fire. The artifact lay wrapped at Jorund's side, yet its light leaked through, casting shadow. WS that danced across the snow. Leaf whispered, staring at the wrapped object. It pulses like a heartbeat. The wind rose, carrying a resonance that rattled bone and soul. Cracks spider-webbed across the glacier, glowing faintly. From the fissures, shadows moved. Then it emerged. A figure stepped forth, tall, skeletal, cloaked in frost. Its body was carved from ice and bone, eyes burning like embers trapped in frozen glass. Each step cracked the earth beneath. The creature shrieked, a sound that split the night, piercing marrow. The fire guttered out, leaving only the artifact's glow. You fools! Herrick staggered back. We broke its prison. Joran gripped his sword, defiance blazing. Then we'll forge a saga from its bones. The beast lunged, faster than mortal sight. Shields splintered, men hurled into snow. Its claws raked the earth, leaving trails of frost that burned like fire. Leaf screamed, clutching the artifact. The runes fly, red light driving the creature back for a heartbeat. But its ember eyes fixed on the disk, hunger burning. Leaf realized then it did not hunt them, it hunted the artifact, and the fight had only just begun. The forest groaned as the creature pressed closer, its ember eyes burning through the storm. Trees cracked under its weight, shadows stretched long and skeletal across the snow. Leaf stumbled, clutching the artifact. Each pulse drained him as though the disk drank his strength. His breath came ragged, legs trembling. Drop it, Herrick snarled. Throw it back before it kills us all. Geron's voice cut through the blizzard, iron and unyielding. No, this is ours. The gods sent us here. Do you think they would test us with storms and monsters only to have us crawl away empty-handed? Bjorn, the oldest of them all, spat blood into the snow. The gods test us, but not all who are tested survive. The creature oak through the tree line, vast and skeletal, frost clinging to its bones. Its shriek split the night, shaking the ground. The men faltered, shields trembling. Leaf cried out, "It wants the disk, not us." But Joran seized him by the collar, dragging him upright. "Silence, we are Norsemen. We claim what is forbidden." Harek's voice was low, bitter, almost swallowed by the wind. "And we die for it." The men pressed on through the frozen pines. Breath steamed like smoke from dying fires. Boots sank into snow that seemed to clutch at their ankles. Behind them, the creature's shriek tore. He threw the night, not merely sound, but a vibration that rattled teeth and made marrow ache. Branches shivered as if recoiling. It lunged from the shadows, claws gouging snow and ice. The men scattered, shields raised, axes flashing, but frost clung to their skin where its touch grazed them, burning like acid. "Shield wall," Joran roared. "Stand, sons of the north." They locked shields, trembling but defiant. The beast slammed into them, splintering wood, hurling men aside like dolls. Bjorn fell, his scream strangled as frost crawled over him, sealing his eyes open in a mask of terror. Leaf raised the artifact. The runes flared, casting a light so harsh it seemed to peel shadows from the trees. The creature recoiled, shrieking, ember eyes roaring to slits for a heartbeat. Silence. Then Joran stepped forward, sword raised. "It fears the disk. With this, we can command it." But Leaf saw the truth in its gaze, hunger, not fear. The artifact was meat to it. The forest twisted around them, no refuge at all. The warriors pressed deeper, but the shrieks followed, splitting the night, rattling their bones. Snow fell thicker, muffling their cries. Yet the beast's ember eyes burned through the storm like coals in a corpse's skull. It struck again. Bjorn raised his shield, but the blow shattered it like brittle bone. Frost crawled up his arm, veins blackening, flesh cracking. Within moments he was a statue, his mouth frozen mid-scream. Bjorn, Leaf cry. Back. Joran dragged him away. He is gone. Axes flashed. Spears thrust. But each strike splintered against flesh that was more ice than body. Harek's axe cleaved deep, thinking he had beaten the creature only for the weapon to be swallowed whole. Frost sealing it in place, the thing bellowed, twisting furiously. Harek lost his grip on the handle and was hurled aside. Blood steamed in the snow. Leaf clutched the artifact. The runes writhed, glowing brighter as he spoke the carved words. His voice trembled, yet the air bent, heavy with a pressure that made ears bleed. He screamed in agony. They burn when I speak them. Speak, boy, Joran thundered. Speak until your tongue is ash. The creature faltered, a cry of rage breaking into a guttural roar. For the first time it staggered back, clawing at the light as if its icy flesh was flayed. Hope flickered, but the disk grew heavier, its glow searing Leaf's palms, blistering skin. He screamed, dropping the artifact into the snow. He light guttered. The monster surged forward, jaws opening wider than a man's chest, breath reeking of rot and frozen graves. The Norsemen scattered, blooded and broken. Bjorn was gone. Harek gasped, and the snow, slow to get up. The hunger of the creature was unrelenting, and the fjord had claimed its first blood. The survivors staggered on, breath ragged, bodies broken. Harek limped, blood soaking his furs. Leaf carried the artifact, though it scorched his hands with every pulse. Each beat like a heart not his own. They collapsed in a clearing, fire flickering weakly against the cold. The disk lay between Joran and Leaf, wrapped in cloth, yet its glow seeped through, painting their faces in corpse light. Harek spat. We should have left it. Bjorn's blood stains the ground. Because of that cursed thing, Joran's eyes gleam feverish. He leaned closer to the wrapped, cursed thing, voice low, reverent. No, Bjorn's blood was the price of greatness. This disk is no curse, but a gift. It bends the creature. It bends the world. Leaf shivered. It bends you, chieftain. Your eyes burn like its runes. Joran laughed, harsh and echoing through the trees. Then let them burn. With this I will be more than a chieftain. I will be a god. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Even Harek, hardened by years of raids, felt a chill deeper than the winter air. That night Joran sat apart from the others, the artifact in his lap. He traced the runes with shaking fingers, whispering words none could understand. The disk pulsed brighter, its glow searing the snow, its hum swelling until it sounded like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Leaf stirred in his sleep, the whispers crawling through his dreams. They were not Joran's voice alone. The artifact also spoke. Its words slithered like serpents, promising power, conquest without end, immortality without mercy. He woke with a cry, sweat freezing on his skin. It speaks. He gasped, jabbing a pointed finger at Joran. It speaks to him. Harek's face was grim. And soon it will own him. From the forest came a shriek, distant yet piercing, the sound of hunger without rest. The men stiffened, clutching their weapons. Joran rose, holding the artifact high. His eyes blazed with unnatural height. Let it come with this. I command the storm, the beast, the gods themselves. The disk pulsed brighter than fire. The glacier groaned in answer. The curse had taken root. The fjord lay in silence, broken only by the crackle of their meager fire. The men huddled close, their numbers dwindled, their spirits frayed. The artifact glowed faintly in Geron's lap, painting his face. In ghostly pallor, his eyes burned with feverish devotion. Herrick watched him from across the fire, jaw tight. Each pulse of the disk seemed to sink deeper into Geron's soul. The chieftain no longer spoke of kin or glory in battle. He spoke only of conquest, of bending gods to his will. Leaf whispered, and shook uncontrollably, "It's changing him." Eck growled, "It has already changed him. If we do not act, it will claim us all." That night, while the others slept, Herrick crept toward Jorund. The artifact lay beside the chieftain, glowing fire, and lie through its cloth. Herrick reached for it, breath shallow, his hand just about touching it. Geron's eyes snapped open. "Traitor," he hissed, rising within a sudden surge. His sword flashed in the firelight. Herrick staggered back, short sword already in hand. "Better a traitor than losing my damn soul." "That thing will kill us all." Jorn advanced, fury blazing. "Better a tyrant than a coward. You would throw away the god's gift. You would spit on fate." Steel rang against steel, sparks flying. The men woke to chaos. Leaf cried out, rushing between them, "Stop, you'll kill each other." But the forest answered with an unnatural scream from the creature, drawn by the artifact's glow. Trees splintered as it descended upon the weary Norsemen. Ember eyes fixed on the disk, the men scattered, terror choking their throats. The beast tore through the clearing, hurling warriors aside. Frost burned the ground where it stepped. Jorund and Herrick fought on, their duel swallowed by the creature's fury. Leaf seized the artifact, its runes blazing in his hands. He shouted the carved words, his voice breaking, yet the air itself trembled. The Cretu re-faltered, shrieking, clawing at the light, but unable to reach it. Leaf screamed, dropping the artifact into the snow once more, unable to hold on to it because of the searing heat. Jorund lunged for it, snatching the disc up, eyes wild. "Mine," he roared. "It is mine." The ice monster shrieked, hunger unrelenting. The fjord drowned in blood and betrayal. Snow fell in blinding sheets. The wind howled like a chorus of the dead, and the glacier loomed ahead, vast, pale, eternal. The men of Stormfang staggered toward it, broken in number, hollow in spirit. Behind them the creature raged, ember eyes burning through the storm. Each step cracked the earth, each breath froze the air. Jorund raised the artifact high, runes blazing. His voice thundered above the gale. "Shield wall, Norsemen, stand. Tonight we carve our saga." In ice the survivors locked shields, trembling but defiant, their axes and swords at the ready. But the beast struck with a fury known he could match. Those who were left to fight were hurled into the snow, blood staining the white ground beneath them crimson. Leaf picked up the artifact from where Jorund dropped it, clutching it tightly. Desperate, the runes flared, casting blinding light. The creature faltered, clawing at the glow. "Speak the words," Jorund roared. "The runes obey us." Leaf shouted, ice trembling, the air bent, the glacier shook, and the thing of ice staggered back, rage escaping its icy lips. With each use, the artifact grew heavier and heavier, its glow searing his flesh once more. His hands no thing more than cooked meat. Leaf cried out, dropping it to the snowy earth. Jorund lunged, possessing the disc once more, a crazed look in his eyes. The creature surged forward, claws raking the air, eyes fixed on the disc. Leaf realized then the artifact was not a weapon, it was a seal. The only way to end the curse was to return it to the glacier. He seized tea. He disked from Geron's grasp, ignoring the great pain emanating from his hands and his chieftain's roar of fury. With all his strength, he hurled the cursed thing into the glacier's heart. The runes blazed brighter than fire. The glacier cracked, the sound booming across the fjord. The creature cried out in agony, clawing at the air, its body dissolving into shards of ice. The fjord-s hook, the storm roared, and then silence. The beast was gone. The men collapsed where they stood, blooded and broken. Joran lay in the snow, eyes seething with rage. You stole my glory, boy. One day I'll take it back. Leaf stared at the glacier, now still. If glory means chains, I want none of it. The fjord lay silent once more, yet deep beneath the ice, something stirred. What was left of the men of Stormfang staggered across the snow, spirits hollow, blood staining their leathers and furs. The echoes of the creature's wails haunted their ears. Leaf led them, hands all but useless from the artifact's glow. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, yet sharpened by terror. The innocence of youth burned away. Behind him, Joran limped, his gaze fixed on the glacier. His voice rasped, fevered. You stole my glory, boy. One day I'll take it back, saying it over and over again. You stole my glory, boy. One day I'll take it back. The sound of a chieftain gone mad. Leaf did not answer. He stared ahead, toward the longship waiting on the shore. The sea was calm now, mocking their suffering. Herrick stumbled beside him, coughing. Blood, no treasure is worth this curse. We should have buried it again. Let the ice keep its secrets. Leaf's voice was low, steady. We did, and yet I fear, or it is not enough. They reached the ship. What little strength they had left. The small band pushed Stormfang into the water and dragged themselves aboard. The oars dipped in, carrying them away from the fjord. The glacier reached, head pale and silent. But as the wind filled their sails, the men felt it. A vibration beneath the sea, a whisper in the storm. The artifact was gone, sealed once more, yet the curse lay. Angered, Leaf stared back at the glacier, heart heavy. Deep beneath the ice, another shadow waited. Story 5, You're Melting. A whirl of snow chased Becca as she burst through the thick door. She slammed it with a backward kick and darted forward across the cabin, making a direct line for the fireplace. Biting the padded gloves from her hands, she flicked them to the ground and presented her icy fingers to the flames. She panted and sniffed, puffing out cold air from her lungs with intermingled groans. She wriggled her tingling fingers, the heat of the roaring fire slowly bringing them back to life. Closing her eyes, she paused, finally getting control of her breathing and settling her agitation. Time fell away, the darkness and the warmth becoming the only things that matter. Ed, you're melting, her father grumbled. Becca jumped so hard that she squealed. Her eyes snapped open, and the room narrowed back into being. He wasn't supposed to be there. Sorry, Daddy, I'll clean up. Promise. So cold. Just need a minute. She whispered once her heels touched back to the floor. A biting wind howl over the roof, the battering of soft snow. Flakes against the windows appeared like a harmless feathering of cotton. Having just been out in it, Becca knew its kind aesthetic was a lie. The absolute darkness of an unhindered night blanketed all but the fluffy shards from view. Once she confirmed her body was still alive and not forever turned to ice. She shed her hat and wet jacket, keeping her padded underlayers in pea lace. Then Becca curled up in the armchair opposite the old man's and basked in the warmth of the dying wood. "You've been crying," he observed. "What? No, I promise. ... I haven't. Probably just read from the storm," he said, before pointing at a pot of tea that warmed by the fireside. Becca sighed in ecstasy at the first sip of the hot brew. The wait while she poured his first had been excruciating. Her hands squeezed the hot clay mug, and every touch of it to her lips warmed her frozen core. She had to fight her eyes from trying to close. No matter how long the day had been, sleep was only for bed. That was the rule. "I know you hate it here," her father suddenly said, making her choke and splutter on the drink. "You've never said that," she croaked. "Still, you hate the darkness, then the endless light, and, of course, the cold. You hate the work and the people. You hate the food and the isolation. Most of all, you hate me. That's a lot of hate to suffer, all for a little money. A lot of money," she muttered. "Enough money." She refrained from arguing or commenting any further. Her internal alarm was sounding. It was a dangerous conversation, and it was the right time to say little. "Maybe it's not worth it for a girl your age. Most teenagers are out with their friends, partying, exploring, and graduating, being pie. Maybe you should just go home, escape, and finally be normal. You'll be old enough to choose a path for yourself next year anyway. You could leave me here, under the ice and snow. You'd be free." Becca paused her indulgence of hot tea and warm fire, scanning her father's face closely. This wasn't his usual anger. There was no frustration or accusation behind his eyes, no hardening of his brow. He was contemplative, questioning, like a wolf, begging to be petted, waiting to bite. "I'd always choose to be with you," she lied. "Anyway, the mines don't rotate out staff for another 6 months. By then we'll be leaving together. I don't love Alaska, but I never expected to. You told me I wouldn't, and you were right. Serving up cafeteria food after home's duty, for an endless stream of rough old miners, is hardly a dream come true. Oh, sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean that. They're all good men. It's just, like you said, it's not high school. It's different, that's all. Not bad. I understand why you brought us here. I know what the money will do for our future. I know you're looking after us. Thank you, Daddy. You don't need to lie anymore," he said, shifting in his seat to look directly at her. Becca flinched and placed her bare feet flat on the floor. She should have stopped talking. Why did she babble on like that? Nervous or not, she should know by now how to mind her tongue better. Her body ached, wanting immediately to run, even though she knew there was nowhere else to go. Ignoring the clamping of her toes against the icy floorboards, Becca forced her expression calm. She knew the sound of her heart hammering would only be sensed by her own ears, and the subtle quickening of her breath would be under control in a moment. But still, she could never quite conquer that instinct to flee. "I would never lie to you. I know better than that," she said, dropping her eyes to fixate on a knot in the wood. "I know, sweetheart," her father hummed. "You've never been able to keep a secret from me. Your feeble attempts at lies were always quickly found out with a little persuasion. No, I'm not accusing you of lying to me. Then what, you know? I remember when you tried telling me it was the neighbor's boy that broke the kitchen window back in Utah. Ha! As if I would have believed that, he laughed. That spineless twerp wouldn't have dared you, though you always dared to push me. Never doing as you were told, always thinking you could do whatever you wanted and get away with it. Once your mother left, we soon put that to rights, didn't we? Yes, Daddy, Becca whispered, wrapping her arms around her chest, pressing her fingers tight against the here lead rib bone that lumped the skin. I learned well how to act appropriately. At least up here there's no one for you to blame your behavior on. Nothing and no one to hide behind, just you and the truth with me and the snow, here to make you face it. Becca's eyes had crept upward while he spoke. When they reached his face and he uttered the word snow, something shifted. All color bled from his skin to a stark white, and the stubble of his chin, dark hair and eyebrows all froze stiff. His eyes went dark. Then she blinked, and the sight was gone. What's wrong? Remembered something you want to get off your chest? He asked, staring daggers into her eyes, but using that same surreal and calm tone. No, Daddy, I've been behaving. This time away from everything had been good for me. It was a smart choice that you made to take this job here. Why don't I make you a fresh pot? I'll get your slippers, too, she said, slinking from her chair and retreating to the corner of the open room toward the tiny excuse for a kitchen. She rinsed the pot and set it with new leaves. As she chewed her lip, waiting for it to refill, she noticed the clock. It was late, far late. Then seemed right. Where were you tonight? Her father asked, reading her mind. Her legs jolted. Trying to force a reaction from her, she stilled them by will alone and forced a smile on her face. I was working the dinner shift for the man with us leaving next season. I need to get as many extra hours in as possible. Make the money. We are here, like you told me to, she answered, knowing it for the truth, but having no explanation for the lost hours since. Run late, did it? He inevitably asked. I guess so. Becca smiled wider. He set the tea by the fire and placed her father's slippers next to his chair. As she tiptoed across the room to grab her own, he spoke to her back. You don't need to lie any more. Becca, standing at the shoe rack by the front door, pressed her palm against the wood. There was nowhere else to go yet when she heard his heavy feet drop onto the boards, when the vibrations of his steps resounded through to her own feet. Her body begged her to run. Always it worked against her, never obeying what her mind knew was necessary to survive. But she was tired, so very tired of the mask, the eggshell, ails, and the fear she didn't have an answer for him, and he would demand the truth. Becca gave in to weakness for only a moment, but it was enough that her body took the chance, grabbed for her hat, tore the door open, and ran out into the freezing night. Becca sprinted across the hard-packed snow. The constant barrage from above had formed solid layers of concrete, not the powdery stuff you might imagine. It made sense. Nothing could endure such constant assault without hardening. Still, it stabbed at the soft of her bare feet like she was running on knives. She pulled on her jacket without slowing, zipping it up and slamming her hands into her armpits. Her fear was too great to care that there was nowhere safe to go, nowhere warm, Nowhere close. No one who would help TH had made it that way. Still, her body would not let her stop. Her mind was blank, and her instincts were doing all the decision-making. Her breath was short and fast, her eyes darting, her throat closed. She ran on, coming to the thick ice of the lake, and not hesitating for a moment before hurtling out onto the glass of its surface. She made for the fishing cabin, simply because it was the only thing in sight that wasn't white. It was where he had so often spent his weekends, the place that had given her the only peace from him she could claim, stopping to quickly assess. He approached. She slipped and skid on her knees across the ice. Her feet were burning, the skin afire with cold pain to the point of no feeling at all. Her hands scraped as they kept her face afar on the rough surface, and as she looked down through the clear window of frozen water, she laughed. Hysterical, she cackled until it turned to sobs, and then smile-painted tears. Her father stared CK up at her, white, dark-eyed in the shadows of the night, hair frozen. "You don't need to lie anymore," she found herself whispering. "You could leave him here, and are the ice and snow, you'd be free. There's enough money." Becca dragged herself up, shook away the tears, and stumbled back toward the cabin on blistering, bleeding feet that she could no longer feel. She swayed over the hushed white, repeating to herself the mantra, "You don't need to lie anymore. You can be free." Leave him onto the ice and snow. She burst through the door, chased by a whirl of and slamming it behind her with her shoulder, then darted forward to the roaring fire. The heat of it was bliss mixed with agony. As her feet began to thaw, she closed her eyes and sunk into the warmth and darkness. Time fell away. "You're melting," her father grumbled. Story 6, Birthday Bones. The story's the same every year. Light the candles, blow the out, heat the cake. I smile while everyone sings. I party with my friends. I have a few drinks, and I go home. Then, the second the clock hits 3:27, I sit up straight in bed and wait for my bones to break. It's an ugly sight, my limbs cracking and twisting, and the smell of blood and marrow isn't exactly the most appetizing thing. But the worst part for me, without a doubt, is the sound, the crunch and pop of bone, the whine of stretching skin, the wet splat of blood, and awful. I've never gotten used to it. Even after 27 years, I can't crack open a soda canister, a rubber band, for days afterwards, without a chill running up my spine. It's embarrassing and awkward and kind of like all the worst parts of puberty squeezed into 10 minutes. Though with maybe a little less acne, it also puts a serious damper on the possibility of any birthday sex. I try not to be too bitter about it. My mom says it's normal, that it runs in the family. Apparently, her cousin in Fresno has the exact same problem, except she goes through it every time she gets her period, so in a way, I guess I got lucky. No one's really sure what the cause is. I've heard genetic disorders, werewolf bites, even a curse, but whatever the reason, the problem remains the same. Every year, at exactly the time of my birth, my body breaks, twists, and rearranges itself, and the next morning I see a completely different person when I look into the mirror. When I was younger and down about the whole thing, my mom tried to make me feel better by saying I was like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. After I turned 13, she stopped trying to make me feel better. This year, it's my 27th birthday and my 27th face. I don't even bother trying to go to sleep. I just stay awake, scrolling on my phone, counting down the minutes till the change. Thankfully, it doesn't hurt, emotional and psychological damage aside. By now, I've learned to plan ahead. There's a plastic cover on the bed to make sure I don't stain my sheets. When the transformation finally comes, it's sudden, a slight twinge in my bones, the only warning I receive. I do my best to breathe through it, to relax and just ride out the wave. My ribs go concave, my fingers bend backward. My teeth shift in their gums and my vision blurs. When my new body finally settles, I wiggle my toes first, just to test things out. Everything seems to have gone smoothly. If anything, it seems to be getting easier with age. I won't know for sure until I measure, but I think I've grown a few inches this time around. I swing my feet over the edge of the bed and pad barefooted to my bathroom to inspect the damage in the mirror. Last year, my face was soft and sweet, the kind that made you feel safe spilling secrets and sharing smiles. This time around, my cheekbones are higher, my chin a little pointier. When I smile, my right incisor is crooked. It's bad enough that anyone would tell me to get braces, but it's not like there'd be much point. I'll have a completely different smile in a year's time anyway. I start practicing expressions, anger, then excitement, then despair. I cycle through the range of human emotions, trying each one on for size. I don't like this face nearly as much as the last one. KS a lot meaner. I curl my lip, tug at the skin under my eyes. Everything feels foreign and out of place. Stretch to thin or pull to tight. I'm going to have to change the placement of my blush aga, and I'm deep in the throes of my examination when my phone buzzes against the counter. My mom's face smiles up at me from the screen, bugging me for a video call. She stays up late every year and dials my number the second the clock hits 3:45, ready to see my new face for herself. Hey, sweetie. Her voice bounces off the bathroom tile. Ooh, I like this one. You look very svelte. Hey, Mom, how she manages to have so much energy at this hour is beyond me. Did everything go all right? She asks. No hiccups this time. No, Mom, no hiccups. After my leg had gotten stuck facing the wrong way in 4th grade, my mom always checked to make sure things went smoothly. Well, that's great. She's holding the camera to close. To her face, her wrinkles on full display, it looks like she's lying in bed. I can hear my dad snoring in the background. I'm very proud of you, supportive to the end. Like always, it's easy for her to be encouraging. She's kept the same face her entire life. You look a little familiar. She squints at my face through her readers. Did you have this face once before? I blink. That's a new one. I've never repeated a face before, frankly. If that was an option, I would have picked one and stuck with it ages ago. No, I'm pretty sure it's new, I said. My mom takes a closer look, biting her tongue. Are you sure? I could have sworn I've seen you somewhere before. I'm your daughter, Mom, I sigh. You've seen me plenty of times before. The whole thing makes me crazy enough as it is if I think about it for too long, and an inquisition from my mom is the last thing I need. Look, I'm pretty tired, and I've got work tomorrow. I'm fine. Everything went fine, and I look fine. Can I call you back tomorrow? Of course, sweetie, my mom chirped. I'm just happy to see your face, huh? I love you. I'll call you tomorrow. Love you too, Mom. Thanks for calling. Get some rest. Oh, and happy birthday. She waves at her phone, then hangs up, leaving me alone in the bathroom. Face harshed by the white fluorescent lights, I take one last look, drinking it all in. This is what I have to work with for the next year. Best to get comfortable with it now. The face of a stranger stares back at me, tired and slightly judgmental. My face just looks more sour. I sigh and flick off the lights, wandering back to my room. I peel the plastic off my bed and crawl under the covers, doing my best to ignore the new sensation of air on my toes as my feet poke out from my too short sheets. The transformation always tires me out. It only takes a moment for me to fall asleep. 3 hours later, my alarm shrieks and yanks me awake. I take a minute to curse myself out for being too dumb to call out of work. I unlock my phone with the passcode, no face or fingerprint ID for me, and turn off the alarm before taking a few precious seconds to stare at the ceiling. New year, new me, same piece of shit job. My clothes are all wrong now, selected for a body that no longer exists. My pants are showing a lot more ankle, and my shirt suddenly has a lot of extra fabric around the chest. I fix up a big breakfast to satisfy my stomach. The transformation isn't painful, but it always leaves me ravenous for the next few days. The walk to my car is quick. Turns out adding a few extra inches of height really helps you cover ground faster. I catch a few strange looks as I walk by, but it's hardly anything new. My neighbors are used to a completely different woman leaving my apartment each morning, so they're allowed a bit of light staring. One girl lets out a sharp gasp upon us, seeing me, her face drained of blood. It's a slightly stronger reaction than what I'm used to, and it's almost enough for me to stop and explain. But her friend, usher her along before I get the chance. My car is cheap and dirty, but it's tolerated quite a few bumps against the curb, and it always waits patiently for me in the parking lot. I feel like why car fit my last face better. My current appearance seems more suited for something sleek and mean, not an old beater. When I hop in, my knees fold up against the steering wheel. The seat hums as I push it back, and I catch another glimpse of my eyes as I adjust. The mirrors, the color may be different, but the heavy purple shadows underneath them are something I've gotten used to. No matter what face I wear, the drive to work sucks, like it always does. 27 minutes through gridlock and top 40 hits mixed with the news on the radio. Some prick in a green Volvo won't let me merge, and I lay on the horn with gusto. Asshole. My voice is almost louder than the horn, and I make a rude gesture as I draw even with him. The Volvo revs its engine and speeds off, leaving me with a cloud of foul black exhaust. Killed in a drunk driving accident at 3:15. The obnoxiously perky radio host is running down the morning news instead of playing my top 40 hits like any decent radio station should. I crank the dial to the next station in a huff. It goes from depressing news to dead rock from the 70s. I cut to the left lane and try not to smile as I pass the Volvo. now stuck behind an old woman in a beat-up sedan. Work is a different flavor of miserable today. Being a low-level assistant at a PR firm is already a special kind of hell, filled with groveling and matcha lattes, but there's a tension in the air that usually means I'm about to deal with an extra pile of shit. One girl rushes by, tugging on a broken heel with one hand and taking notes on her phone with the other. The intern is in the corner, apologizing profusely on a headpiece, sweat beading his brow. The TV on the wall is playing the news at full blast, a much higher volume than my manager normally allows. Lucy says it throws off her internal monologue, but apparently whatever's playing is more important today. Even the news anchor looks a little somber, her blonde wig deflated and limp. She's covering the death of some celebrity, sporting a picture-perfect pout. I can feel a headache pulsing behind my eyes already. I really show. Eld called out. Holly sits at the center of the chaos, phone in hand, feet propped up on her desk, chomping on a stick of electric blue raspberry gum. She's humming a K-pop song I feign till I recognize under her breath. Morning, I say, heading over to the only safe haven. You know what's going on. It seems kind of tense. Morning. Holly blows a bubble and scrolls twice. Not a clue. How the lead receptionist could get away with caring so little was beyond me. You already send somebody for coffee? I ask. I'm hoping the answer is yes. You know that's your job, she says. Damn it. Caramel frap with extra whip, please. I think they said they were out of caramel yesterday. What? She groans and finally looks up at me. When she does, her jaw drops. Whoa, you look different. My birthday was yesterday. Holly, we've been over this. I know my situation is a little unique, but I've been working here for 5 years. She's had plenty of time to get used to it. She chews on her gum, staring thoughtfully at my face. You look kind of familiar, she says. Really, that's the second time I've heard that today. Yeah, I swear I've seen you somewhere before. She narrows her eyes and studies my face before snapping her fingers. Cut it, you look just like my cousin Han. Nah, is that a good thing, I ask. She blows another huge bubble and it pops over her lips. I mean, it could be worse. Apparently satisfied, she turns back to her phone. Oh, by the way, Lucy said she wanted you to stop by her office before you grab coffee. Sorry, forgot to mention it earlier. Great, my headache sharpens to an ice pick jammed into my skull. Lucy's usually busy dealing with celebrities to focus on the assistants. It's not a great sign if I've got her attention, but there's no choice but to face her down. As I walk to her office. See, the door swings open and Kirsten runs out, her face shining with tears. That can't be good. I start to feel queasy on top of the headache. Maybe Lucy's in one of her firing moods, and this is the day I finally get laid off. Come in, her voice sounds suspiciously perky. I journey into the lion's den. Lucy's office is clean and fresh in a way that tells me she rules with an iron fist. At home, she's got one of those fancy multicolored keyboards designed to have quiet keys and the soothing sounds of water running filter through the speakers. It's all very zen. Lucy's looking out the window, chin in her hand. I'm fully prepared to lose my job, picking up fraps and Americanos only knit so much good favor. So when she turns around, sees me and bursts into tears. I'm a little shocked. Thank God you're all right. She leaps out of her chair and wraps me in a bear hug. I give her an awkward pat on the back. Yeah, everything's fine, I say. Why? Lucy knows about my problem, but she's never really seen to worrying about me that much. Half of the time, I'm convinced she doesn't really know my name. I'm not sure when we got so close. I was so worried, she sobs. What are you talking about? I gently peel her off of me and look her in the eyes. This happens every year, Lucy. It was my birthday yesterday. Lucy's brow furrows. Your birthday, she trails off. Wait, Jan, is that? The tears dry abruptly, and she lets me go and takes 3 steps back. Her jaw hangs open, her eyes blown wide with fear. I shift in comfortably. Lucy's been through this whole thing before, so this reaction seems a little unnecessary. I'm half wondering if I managed to miss something on my face during last night's inspection. Maybe I've got a lazy eye. Of course it's me. Lucy, we've gone over this a few times, I gently prod. Lucy's mouth still hasn't fully closed. I consider whether tossing a paper clip on her tongue would be worth losing my job. Instead of dignifying me with a response, she moves to her desk and furiously types something in with shaking hands. She beckons me over to view her monitor, face grim. She's pulled up a news article, fresh from this morning, with a picture of a grisly car accident splashed front and center. Young starlet killed in accident. The headline reads, "My mouth goes dry." The article continues, supermodel Megan Rogers was killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver at 3:15 this morning. Authorities are still searching for the culprit. If you have any tips, call the number below. I know that. Name? Megan Rogers was one of our clients, a new big name to help out the firm. Lucy had been thrilled about it. I never met the lady in person, but I knew she was supposed to be the new hot thing. Right now, explain this, Lucy says. I stare back at her. Sure, her death was sad, but it had nothing to do with me. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm walking through a verbal landmine, and I'm worried I've got bigger problems than just losing my job. You will be in a second, Lucy says. She scrolls down a little further through the article, and that's when I see the picture. Same strong nose, same brown eyes, same twist to the upper lip. Hell, even the same croaked incisor. Most damning, are the little things, the slope of her shoulders, the curve of her nostrils, the slant of her brow. It's a face that is new to me, but intimately familiar. It's the face of a dead woman, but it can't be, because it's my own face, clear as day, staring right back at me. Now, I know about your little situation, Lucy says, but you can see why this might leave me with a few questions. I can barely hear her over my own racing thoughts. I've cycled through different faces and bodies my entire life. Tall, fat, weak, ugly, stunning. I have had the pleasure of seeing it all. My whole life I had thought that they were fresh faces, a sort of rebirth, with no history to bog them down, no strings attached. But this changes everything I knew, a complete upending of my reality, as poor dead Megan Rogers' face stares accusingly at me. One question plays on repeat in my mind, drowning out everything around me. Have I been wearing the faces of the dead? Story 7, The Ravens Who Watch, Ravens are curious creatures. They hunt for food as we do. They solve problems as we do. And they entertain themselves as we do. But some are unlike the others. Some just watch, they observe, they learn, they wait, sometimes for centuries, just to be human once more. I moved to Isafura from London in August for a post-grad, being unsure of what I wanted in life, but knowing I would hang myself working at a 9-to-5 desk job. It's a small town in the West Fjords of Iceland that's so far hidden at even the ring road, which goes around most of the country's perimeter, was at least a 200-mile drive away, but it truly is the country's hidden gem. Being that far north, however, the sun never sets in the summer, so midnights are as bright as middays, but the winters are quite the opposite. I started guiding for a local tour company. Mostly I would be on the bus tour for cruise ship tourists. I would talk on the microphone as the driver took us all around the valleys and over the mountain passes, sometimes to Freya's farm to play with her sheep. My favorite tour was to the Dynjandi waterfall, where we would always pass by the Mjolkarvirkjun hydroelectric power station run entirely by waterfalls. Green energy plus a limitless water supply means that every household comes with a washing machine, dryer, and a dishwasher, a luxury every student dreams of. There's only one set of power lines in the entire West Fjords, which run along and over the mountains, providing power to all 7,000 of us scattered about in villages and other small towns of barely 1,000 people. Often the winter storms do some damage, so we get our fair share of blackouts until the lines can be fixed or until someone starts up the backup diesel generators. My favorite story to tell would be about the Utbur. In the olden days, if a mother could not care for her newborn, she would abandon it in the lava fields. The child would return as an Utbur, a lost spirit taking the form of a raven, lingering in the lava fields, waiting for unsuspecting travelers. There is a sad truth to the legend. Ravens are clever and curious creatures, and they often like to mimic the sounds they hear, like water drops, car horns, or even mimicking someone shouting. So when they would find a by abandoned in the empty fields crying for their mother, the ravens would mimic those cries as they flew all the way back to the villages, perhaps to summon the villagers to the baby's aid. Sadly, there wouldn't be anyone to care. Ravens are such fascinating creatures. The thought of learning about these intelligent beings really excited me, so I wanted to study them for my FINA thesis, even despite my boss's ominous warning, "Beware of the ravens who watch," she said at the end of one of my tours she was shadowing. At first I thought she was trying to be funny by adding to the spooky atmosphere, but there was something about her tone suggested a hint of sincerity. I hadn't given it more thought until the very last day the final crew SE ships departed before for the winter came. It was when I was discussing thesis ideas with another classmate that I noticed my boss got very pale. She suddenly seemed disconcerted by the conversation. I asked if she was all right, but she leaned in very closely and asked, "Are you absolutely sure about studying the ravens?" I told her it was only an idea. My topic may change. I asked her again why she was so agitated at this idea, but she only replied, "Beware of the ravens who watch." This time I asked what she meant by that. She leaned in closer on me again as she put an arm around me and whispered, "People disappear when the lights go out. not for too long. Everyone here knows everyone. We're all practically related, so of course we'll realize Simeon. He is missing, but just long enough that they won't be noticed. But the ones who come back, they are not the same people who leave. So what does this have to do with ravens? I asked, confused. But she merely shook her head, pulled back, and started to put on her coat. That's why I never stay over the winter. You see, she chucked. I love Isafjord, and I would not live anywhere else. But I go to Reykjavik to stay with my mother. I hate the city. I really do. But I don't want to be taken away like the others. She gave a cackling laugh. A laugh someone who had only 3 hours of sleep would give before she drove off into the evening dusk. Carla was one of those Icelanders who claimed the elves and hidden people spoke to her. She was someone who never slept more than 4 hours a nig. She ran marathons for fun and lived off nothing but protein bars and black coffees. Coffee strong enough to keep the average person up for 3 days straight. But she had a point about the winters here. As winter came, we lost daylight at a rate of knots. The sun would be so low in the sky that it would stay hidden behind the mountains. And after seeing the final mid-November sunset, we would be left at the mercy of the darkness until the spring. Still, there were enough Christmas lights to make the town feel cozy and homely. I hadn't given more thought about Carla's minus warning until I met that beau. I later got a winter job as an after-school coach for 5 to 7-year-olds. There was one child, however, who stood out to me. He never did get on with the others and would often be almost disturbed at everything they did. I had to call his mother when he got violent one afternoon. I thought she would give me the whole spiel of how he wasn't normally like THIS, and she would deal with him when she got home. But instead she just asked me to be a bit more forgiving with him. He hasn't been himself for the past year, she said, not sin. See the blackout. I asked her what she meant. She looked down, trying to find the right words to tell me in English. The winters here are dark. You have not had your first blackout, but it is a darkness like you have never experienced. Sometimes it distresses people so much it changes them, but it is not like trauma. It is like they are another person. They lose memories, forget friends and family members, and forget how to do simple things like drive a car, or make a phone call, or even turn on the shower. I asked her if there were others like her son. She said there were sometimes. They change for the better. Angry and moody people would often become more relaxed and friendly, but aside from acting creepy and possessed, they all had one thing in common. They would all be missing for a few days after a blackout. I told Trevor about it on the way home. He didn't seem to care. He was too busy complaining about our latest assignment. But I wasn't listening to him either. I suddenly felt very disconcerted, like a dog sensing a storm in the distance. Something felt off. I looked around, but only saw a few passers-by and some birds, gulls and ravens. I remembered Carla's warning. Once again, beware of the ravens who watch. Most of them seemed to be more interested in the contents of the bins or bullying the seagulls. But there was one that was different. One sat on the roof ominously still, keeping its gaze firmly on us. Even when we turned onto a different road, I noticed it flew up to a higher vantage point and kept its eyes locked onto us. I pointed at the bird to Trevor, and for a moment they kept their eyes locked onto each other. He yelled sharply to try to scare it away, but its eyes stayed transfixed on us. Trevor's attention shifted away to say goodbye. He wasn't the most self-aware and didn't realize just how loudly his words echoed in the fjord. But I could have sworn one of those echoes was strangely distorted, as if it hadn't from the mountains echoing, almost as if it came from the raven mimicking Trevor. It made me remember the stories of the Utbur again. Ravens mimicking cries of the dying newborns, a bando, dead in the lava fields. It all happened on our first blackout. I remember the darkness of that night when the lights faded all at once. It happened roughly just before midnight. The darkness was nothing like I'd ever seen before. The skies were empty, and the air was oddly still. It was as if the town had been swallowed. All I could make out were the faint silhouettes of buildings and mountains, barely illuminated from trickles reflected by the snow. That was when I heard it, a soft knocking. Only it wasn't a knock in the usual sense. It almost sounded like something pointy and sharp, like a cane or a ski pole tapping against the wood. I wanted to use the light from my phone to move about, but I forgot where I had left it. As I fumbled about in the dark searching for any light source, the knocking sound grew more frantic and sharper, but I still couldn't find that damn phone. Little did I know that my missing phone had saved my life. As the knocking grew more frantic, I stopped searching and instead rubbed my hands against the walls, feeling my way towards the door. Gently, I scanned my hands against the grooves between the wood and metal of the door frame until I could feel the cold metal of the handle. But just as I had placed my hand on it, the knocking had stopped all of a sudden. I tried to look through the window to see if I could make out anyone outside, in case it was a neighbor who was locked out of their home, or if it was just something stuck to the walls that had blown into the wind. But I couldn't hear anyone, and the night was still and quiet. Not a whisper of a breeze could be heard. I looked through the door window, but couldn't make anything out but the silhouettes of the buildings. So I turned to head back to my room. Then I heard it again. This time it came from across the road. I peered through the window once more, but still I couldn't make anything out. From across the road, where T. Rivor lived, I heard the door open just as the knocking became more frantic. I thought I could make out Trevor holding a small light in his hand, illuminating a small circle around him. The light pointed in my direction, but something was blocking the beam. Something had emerged from the ground, and from its shadow grew a shape that almost seemed human. Almost, as it rose, it seemed to unfurl something along its sides, like a bird expanding its wings. All of a sudden, it swiped forward at the house, and the faint light that was casting its shadow had disappeared. Almost immediately, the lights came on. It always takes a while for the diesel generators to get going. In theory, people could take that time to appreciate the stars or even the northern lights if they were out. But the Icelandic skies were always so littered with clouds and mist that it was rare to catch such sights. I tried to scan the area to figure out what this mystery figure was. I slowly paced forward outside towards the other house, looking for this mystery creature, but there was nothing. Strangely, though, Trevor's door was left open. I walked inside to investigate and was greeted by Trevor's housemates, but Trevor himself was nowhere to be seen. I thought he had gone on a midnight walk to enjoy the dark sky, but it was only as I left the house that I noticed something sticking of the snow, a single black feather. Trevor didn't turn up to class the next day. We first thought that he was ill, but his room always seemed to be empty. After a few days, we considered telling someone, the lecturers, the police, mountain rescue, anyone who could shed any light on why he had just mysteriously disappeared. But I was against it, because of what I saw later the next night. I had gone for a walk up along the mountain pass, following darker skies for a better view of the northern lights. I was alone. I had reached the furthest point I could get to before the snow block hid my path. As I looked above the lights streaking over the mountains that pierced the sky, I froze. The lights illuminated a silhouette dancing on the ledge of the summit. I couldn't be sure if it was a person. They moved in the most contorted way, like a marionette pulled by a child who did not know how to properly control it. I watched it for what seemed like hours, trying to figure out if it was someone needing help or if it even was a person. I don't know if it was my desperation to try and find him, but the shape of the thing, I could have sworn it looked like Trevo. He is quite round, fat and stout, and he walks with a hunch on his neck from probably years of poor posture. That figure, the silhouette, looked so much like him that I was almost certain it was. But as I took a step forward, it suddenly froze, as if it could see me watching it from hundreds of meters below. That was when it dropped back and suddenly disappeared. For days after the black cat, Trevor finally reappeared, but he seemed like an entirely different person. The bubbly, annoying, and loud man we all knew was now morbidly quiet and distant. We tried to ask him where he was, but all he would say in response was, "I had to figure myself out first." What was stranger was his accent. Trevor was from Texas, but now he had this strange Icelandic accent. He was even struggling with his English. Compared to my London accent, I always joke he sounded like a hillbilly with an eye for his cousin. But it was as if he had only just learnt to speak the language. Even stranger, he started grumbling gibberish to himself. I soon got suspicious and started secretly recording him. To my surprise, it almost sounded like Icelandic, but not the way we had been taught. It was so grumbled I could barely make out what he was saying. I finally found someone to help me translate. I'm glad I did. If I hadn't, well, I don't know what would have happened to me. Frika would sometimes invite me to her farmhouse for dinner, even long after the tourist season had ended. Her husband, Arnwer, didn't speak English, so it was a good opportunity to practice my Icelandic. I played the recordings to her, but she seemed quite confused. "Is your friend from Iceland?" she asked. "No," I replied. "He speaks like an low Icelandic man. He sounds a bit like Arnwer, and his dialect seems very old. Things even I would call Arnwer an old grandpa for saying." Some of the things he would say in Icelandic would be nonsense words, but old nonsense words, the equivalent of anyone my age saying, "Good heavens," or "rascals," or "scallywags." But what was stranger would be the random comments he would make. He once slipped on the ice, and I asked him if he was all right, and I thought he was just grumbling out of annoyance. But according to Frika, It sounded like he was saying, I forget this body can fall down, is Other called once, but he just stared wide-eyed at his phone until it stopped ringing. He asked me why that box was sounding on its own. I told him it was his mother calling, probably because she hadn't heard from him in days, but he continued to stare and mumble something along the lines of a mother's. Finally, I have been calling for a mother for many a day now. It was the very last VHR, Ace Freaka translated. That was what made me decide to leave Isafjord, to leave Iceland for good, never to return. I was once complaining on our walk home about how miserable the dark, sunless winter was making me, but I heard Trevor whisper something out of earshot. Though the wind roaring in the background stained the recording, she could very clearly make out the words that still haunt me to this day. Worrying not, we will come for you next. I left Isafjord the very next day, and I never returned. I hitchhiked a lift with someone who had come to visit for the weekend and was on his way back to our Reykjavik. The man who was driving was happy to take me as long as I split the cost of fuel. I told him I would pay for the entire journey if he would leave before dark. I hadn't even packed any bags. We set off just as the street lights were beginning to come on. I looked back as we rolled over the mountain pass, and just before the town slowly disappeared in the distance, the lights faded all at once as Isafjord was plunged into another blackout.